Good morning, I'm Chris Fox, and today we're tackling the difference between telling and showing. And this can be more challenging than it sounds, so I'm going to go over a few examples in the next section. We're going to take a look at my screen, and we'll break down the wrong way to do it and the right way to do it. And hopefully after just a couple of examples, it'll be very clear what we can do in our own writing to make sure that we're doing a little bit more showing and a little bit less telling. So without further ado, let's jump into the meat of the video. So the big mistake that I made when I first started writing is that I was trying to explain what was going on in the world. And what I've since learned is that with characters, we need to present kind of our prose and the story in the world in the same way that humans experience things. So think about how you see and hear and feel things in the world around you, and you want your reader to feel exactly those same things. And that begins with the rule that you see at the top here: 93% of all communication is nonverbal. Let that sink in if you're unfamiliar with the concept. The vast majority of the way that we communicate as people with each other is through nonverbal means. And most of that is body language, which is why being in person allows you to communicate so much more effectively. A lot of it is in vocal tone. It's not the words you use, it's how you say them. It's how you're presenting that information. And so again, that's 93% of all communication. And that is why telling is not nearly as effective as showing. When you are telling, you are stripping out all of the nuance that you would normally infuse into something like that. So let's take a look at emotions to start with. If you want to convey an emotion to the reader, you can tell the reader that this emotion is occurring, or you can show them some piece of information that shows that that person is experiencing an emotion. If someone's angry, give them some body language to show that anger. So looking at our first example here, telling, Jake was mad. This is very, very common. I do it even in my own writing. It makes me cringe every time I read one of my older books and see this. And what I could have been doing is something more effective, like how does Jake react to anger? Like I need to ask myself this as the writer. This character, Jake, how does he react when he gets angry? And so I've decided that he tends to have an explosive temper, and that manifests by slamming his fist into things and getting a really wild look in his eyes that is very reminiscent of somebody that I know in real life. And so I'm sort of channeling that. Now, anyone who reads this, who has ever seen somebody get angry like that, is going to have a much, much more visceral reaction than simply reading, Jake was mad. If you look at the second example here, Sarah eyed Jake curiously. I mean, that kind of conveys the information that you need it to. But look at the second example. Sarah caught Jake's eye just for an instant. She broke contact, but as Jake watched out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that she kept glancing back over, then hurriedly away. Both of these examples kind of give us the same information. Sarah is eyeing Jake curiously in both. But in one, it's very straightforward. In the other, it actually feels like maybe we're in Jake's head seeing this happen and sort of experiencing it. And that's the goal. You want to give the cues that are going to show what your character is experiencing emotionally and how they are filtering the information that they're seeing, what their bias is. Like, what one person sees and another person sees, they're going to react very differently to. So it can be the same set of events, but they're going to have different reactions. Now, the second big thing where I see people really wrestling with telling versus showing is when relaying information, trying to get information across to the reader. And we tend to do it in a very plain way. So in this example, Sarah peered nervously out the kitchen window. The news said the hurricane was coming. Now I could keep going for a few more sentences and maybe describe the sky as dark, but there's no conflict here. There is no emotion. There's no stakes. It's just sort of like, yeah, there's a hurricane. But then we go down a little further and look at the last example. Sarah reached into her purse and fished out the pack of cigarettes. She didn't light them. She only had 8 left, and the hurricane would take out power for days. Who knew when she could get more? She peered out the dirty kitchen glass and the quickly darkening sky. Sheets of rain fell in the distance, and the wind tugged trees back and forth like nature weeding the world's biggest garden. So now we see the effects of the storm. We know the hurricane is coming. We know that she's low on supplies and is a little bit scared. You can pack so much more in by showing the emotional state of your characters. Anyway, this is meant to be a quick tip, guys, and I do try to keep these short. If you have more questions on how to infuse more showing into your prose, please ask those in the comments. I'm happy to do a follow-up video or to just answer those questions below. In the meantime, Voidworm launched last week very successfully. I'm extremely pleased about that. I have been cranking out Spellship this week. I'm 3 days into the writing, and it looks like it'll take me a total of 8 days to finish the manuscript, but only if I get back to the writing, and so that's where I'm going to go. I'll see you guys next week.